Welcome, everybody, to the Here Brotherhood podcast. I'm so excited because today we have my good friend, Brock Painter, who is with us. He's the founder of Neuromastery. He's a father, he's a husband, and just a good man. Just little background. We met in March of this year. We did an event together called Suffer Together, which is a combining of multiple communities, men's communities, coming together to do something hard together. We did a cold plunge and a sauna. And it was amazing because I'm pretty sure half the people that came were able to come because they knew that there was a sauna, which was generously donated by Brock.
The mobile sauna.
The mobile
it was
sauna,
amazing.
yes.
Yeah.
And how many people fit in that thing?
Oh, I think we had at least 50 at one point.
Gosh, yeah.
We were shoulder to shoulder all in there.
Nice. Just to make it warmer, right?
Where everyone wanted to be. Yeah.
That's right. Because it was freezing. It was March. It was the end
30th,
of March.
yeah.
Yeah. It was a cold day. Well, so give us a bit of an introduction of you. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from.
Well, thanks for having me on, though. This is awesome, and I love the Here Brotherhood. It was funny, before that event had even happened, there were multiple people that came up to me and said, you guys need to meet the Here Brotherhood. And they said it to almost every event that I went to. So I was like, I gotta meet them somehow. And then John reached out and said, hey, Brock, do you want to bring us, do you have a mobile sauna? And I was like, yeah, I do.
Funny you should ask.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm there. And it was awesome. I love cold plunges. I love saunas. Just a little intro about me. So I'm the founder of a company called Neuromastery. I run a wellness program for men. I help them build mind and body resilience. And in that, just a little bit of my story. I'm from Riverton, Utah, grew up with 4 older brothers, playing sports all the time. I live a very active lifestyle pretty much my whole life. And that's always been a part of my journey, was being active and playing sports and things like that. There was a little bit of what got me to where I'm doing Neuromastery was where when I was playing football, I played for about 8 years. And when I was 14, I received about 4 concussions in the span of a month.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, my mom told me, she said, hey, if you get another concussion, you're not going to play. So me being the smart kid that I was, said, well, then I'm not going to tell you.
Oh.
And so I played for another 5 years. And then they added up to be pretty heavy. I was getting bloody noses about 2-3 times a week. I would randomly pass out. And it got to a point where I was like, I got to tell her. So I told my mom what was going on. She took me to the doctor, got an MRI, and went through the whole doctor system, right? They gave me medication, said, hey, Brock, this is going to solve all your problems. And they did while I was on them. But the second I stopped, everything came back. And so thought to myself, there must be a better way. And when I started to research and figure out how the mind and body connected and how we can help regrow our systems and how we can function on an optimal level. And not only that, but when I couldn't play football anymore, there was a lot of emotional things that went on because I lost a lot of my friends. I lost a lot of the things that I was passionate about. I'm obsessive, so all I did was football. And then all of a sudden, from one day to the next, that was gone. And so I had to figure some things out. And from that point on, that pivoted me in the path of personal development, which changed a lot of my outcomes in life.
I love that. And I think my favorite stories are the ones where somebody actually lived through the thing that they had to overcome and the thing that they're preaching currently. I think it gives you more power, and it shows in your passion and in your energy for what you're doing. And I didn't know a lot of that backstory, so that's fascinating. And gosh, how hard would that be to just all of a sudden have to drop everything that you're passionate about at once? I'm glad you told your mom.
Me too.
So that it didn't turn into worse problems.
Well, I want to dive right into some of the things that you learned about, because that's a fascinating space, I think, to begin. As you mentioned, I mean, assuming there's healing as a part of this, but I think you called it something else, and I already forgot. It was like you didn't say rewiring. What was the word you used?
Regrowth.
Regrowth. There it was. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about some of the insights you gained, maybe at the time, but also what you've continued to learn and build upon that. And let's just get started there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'll jump back and forth because some of the things I didn't know in the moment, but I know now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I knew I was doing the things, but I didn't realize what I was doing. And now I've kind of found the science behind a lot of it.
Yeah,
so when
cool.
I say regrowth, that comes from the science side.
Okay.
But in the moment, there was a day where I was told I couldn't play football anymore. And that night it hit me, right? And I went down to my room all by myself. I was laying on the floor, feeling bad for myself, thinking, what's the point? I don't know what I'm going to do now. I've just lost my identity.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to go to school? What friends am I going to have? How am I going to hang out, right? And, I had sad music playing and everything.
Of course, you have to.
And in that moment, I had this realization inside of myself that as a kid, I always had this mentality that I wished someone or something could come and save me. That I always had this expectation that one day things would work out. If I could just get to this point, then everything will be okay. And when I was sitting there laying on the floor, I realized that nobody was going to come save me. I had to do it myself. And in order for me to be able to save myself, I have to really get to know myself. And so I sat down on a table for the next 3 hours, and I wrote down everything that I liked about the world. And it was a list of over 300 things. And it was just like, I like apples. I like that I care, or just everything that I could think of. And then I wrote another list of things that I didn't like. And I said, okay, it was another list of about 300 things. That one was a bit longer, it seemed like. And what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to spend 80% of my time in the things that I do like. I'm going to try to be where I'm going to feel more natural. But I'm going to spend 20% of my time checking off these things and making sure that I can learn to be comfortable in these uncomfortable places, because I don't want to be so fragile. I felt fragile in that moment, and I wanted to become strong. And so I did the things that were going to create a strong person in my head at the time. And so I started to check off that list as best as I could, and I would pick 2 things a week. So I didn't overwhelm myself trying to do the whole thing, but I just picked 2. And I would gradually try to expose myself to whatever was going to, bring that up, whether it be like one of the biggest ones that I remember is sarcasm. Hated sarcasm because it was always just a way for people to say mean things and
get away with
and
it.
get away with
Yeah.
it. And so I would try to confront that, and so that way it didn't bother me, to where I knew who I was and I knew what I was going to do, and that was a part of that. Another thing was I started to really understand what created health. I needed a body that could function properly, and it wasn't at the time. And so, I started to exercise more. I started to sleep better. I had some discs that had got slipped in my neck that were out of place just from me getting compressed. And I, instead of trying to go, just a pill that was going to make me feel better, I went to a masseuse who actually massaged the bones back in place. And then I started to do things that were going to help regrow my brain, whether that be what I was eating, what I was exercising, my sleep, my recovery, how I interacted with people. And those things all created this healthy lifestyle and helped me understand myself a whole lot better. And that was kind of the beginning of everything.
So how old were you?
17.
Gosh, I feel like this is a very mature 17-year-old that's able to sit down and do all that. My question, just following up, is who taught you to do that? Where did that idea come from? What was happening in this moment where you just got up and decided to do those things? Was that a practice that you'd done in the past? Did you hear about somebody doing that? You read about it? Like, what drove you to do that?
To be honest, no one. I had never learned it before. I just wanted to know myself better.
Cool.
And so I figured that started with my likes and dislikes. And I figured I didn't want any dislikes. And so that was the best I could come up with at the time.
Wow.
That's awesome. So you mentioned this idea of regrowth and neuroplasticity and obviously neuroscience. Like, tell us a little bit about getting into neuroscience and learning about that, and maybe some things that have stood out to you, maybe things that weren't obvious to you at the time, but now you're like, oh, that's what was going on, right?
Yeah, no. So now I'm obsessed. I love behavioral neuroscience and learning how to influence behavior and making it systematic. Like, one of the things that you're talking about with neuroplasticity is literally changing the form and structure of your brain.
Yeah.
A lot of times we like to think that, genes are the thing that's creating our outcomes, or that we're just by default, we are who we are, and it's the world's job to change around us. You see that a lot with the world today. But when you look at the neuroscience, you can change pretty much anything you would like to, as long as you're willing to do what it takes. And I've learned that with neuroplasticity, where you're able to create new connections in the brain. And part of what I realized as I started to go through this and as I've gotten older, at first I tried to eliminate a lot of the things that I didn't like in this life. I tried to eliminate bad habits. I tried to eliminate things that I didn't like and get away from them. But that was very unhelpful, because when it comes to neuroplasticity, you'll realize really quick that you're never going to get rid of old structures. Those structures are always going to be there, except for old age or disease.
Hmm.
And so you have to regrow a new structure that's more powerful. And then what you do is once you create a new structure and you do something enough times, it's going to get more powerful and stronger and easier. Because what you're doing is you then create what's called myelin, which is basically like if you took an electrical cord, wrapped it with electrical tape so the current could flow easier. And that's what happens in your brain. And then what happens is it gets tied by this thing called the oligodendrocytes, which makes it tighter and tighter and tighter. And the tighter that it gets, the faster that pathway is going to fire. And that's what you're trying to create. But the thing that most people get wrong is we think that what our brain is wiring in is what's best for us. And that's wrong. Your brain does not care about what's best for you. And it doesn't care about your goals. And it doesn't, because what it's worried about is safety. And where it's
Survival.
found safety is in familiarity. And so it wants to stay in these patterns of familiarity as much as it can. And so when you start to create these new patterns of behavior, it doesn't feel like you. It doesn't feel natural. It feels out of place.
Right.
Because
so there's
you're
resistance to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of funny enough, talking about resistance, like what creates neuroplasticity is
Resistance.
agitation, friction coupled with focus, which means discomfort. There's no way around it. And so, not knowing that at the time, when I started to face these things, that's what I was doing is I was creating this new pattern of behavior for myself of someone who was strong, new identity. But now knowing that is, now I can continuously do that because you're never going to be strong enough, right? You can always grow. You can be more courageous. And that's where it gets really fun.
That's interesting. Okay, you mentioned also an interest and deepening an understanding around emotion as well. And I think there's obviously a lot of connection here with what's happening in the brain, with what we're experiencing emotionally. And so I'd love to jump into that a little bit.
Yeah, emotions are something that I love because it's a world where there's no organization and it's there's not sense to it, right? It's nonsensical, it's unorganized, it doesn't make sense, it's not unlogical. And a lot of times
That's why I like emotion. That's why I'm emotional.
yeah. Well, that's why creatives tend to go to that place because organization is harder for them. But a lot of times we try to give logic to a unlogical world and then we end up very lost. And that's where emotions start to play a role. And so, just going back to my own story, I tended to be a more fearful kid. I grew up with 4 older brothers who wouldn't let me be afraid because if I didn't, I was going to go anyways, or I was going to be made fun of. Like, they would be like, "Oh, you're a sissy. You're just going to cry the whole time." Right. And for me, I just wanted to keep up. Like my whole goal in life was to keep up with my brothers. And so I couldn't be afraid, but I was. I didn't really like boating, which is one of my favorite things now. I was scared of dirt bikes. I was afraid to do a lot of the things. And I honestly, just funny enough, like I slept on my parents' floor for a lot of my childhood because I was afraid there was a ghost in my room. Like, and that creates like this helplessness, thinking that I couldn't handle situations. And I tried to give logic to that as I started to figure myself out. I tried to be like, oh, just be stronger, push through. I can do this by myself. I don't need no one's help. And I would just try to push all my triggers away as much as I can. Anything that would make me afraid, I would try to push it away and just do the thing. And then as I got older, I realized that created some self-destructive habits. Like I was always the kid in high school that wanted to plan the parties. I wanted people to come hang out. But I realized as I got older that was a really unhealthy pattern because I did it out of the fact that when I invited everybody over to my house, it was because I thought that I wouldn't get invited anyways, that they weren't going to like me if I did it. If I don't do this, then
you aren't going to be accepted, wanted. Yeah.
And that was really hard.
Yeah.
And I remember testing it a few times and I wasn't invited. And that made it even more true. And I created this belief system that I was unwanted. Obviously, understanding what I know in the personal development world, I tried to give logic to it. I tried to understand it. And that never helped. Because one thing is like when it comes to emotion, the goal is not to ever get rid of any part of you. No matter how hard it is. It's not the anxiety, it's not the depression, it's not the anger, it's not the frustration. All those things are beautiful parts of you as a human.
Yeah.
Always. Like that part of me that wanted people to care was beautiful. It just had unhealthy portrayals and it had unhealthy ways of coming out. And because I didn't want it there. I didn't want to recognize it. So the goal when I'm working with emotions and when I'm working with myself, the goal is to be able to understand my external triggers, befriend my inner experiences, and then learn to take action. But it's not get rid of them ever.
Mm.
It's learn to understand and befriend first. They got to be a part of me. Because once you befriend them, you understand them, and then you realize like they're there for your best interest. And that's one of the beautiful things when it comes to emotions, is because if we try to avoid our triggers, they will consume you and they will eat you up. The more you try to control them, the more they're going to control you.
Right. Yeah.
So good. Have you heard of the book No Bad Parts?
I haven't.
Okay.
I want to read it.
It's very similar to what you're talking about. It comes from I can't remember the author's name, but it comes off of the IFS, internal family system model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of parts, right? This idea that and my favorite part of the whole concept of parts is it's an analogy that the author used about Christianity and Jesus, right? How him as an example of all of these parts that we have inside of us, like you said, a lot of times we try and cast them out. Like the lepers, like the diseased, the outcasts. We try and keep them outside of the city walls, right? Mm-hmm. We try and cast them out. And what did Jesus do? He went to them and he healed them and he made them his friends. And I just love that example because so often, like you said, we're trying to push away the ugly parts of us, the things that we hate, the things that we, but in reality, what they are is untrained. They never got the training that they needed to fill the role that they need to in our lives. And so we talk about anxiety a lot, and we just saw Inside Out 2 with our family, and it's interesting to see anxiety as that emotion that it's just trying to protect us. It's trying to protect us from the things that we're scared of, to protect us from being embarrassed or from being unpopular or from all these things. And really, it's just it can be a good thing. These are parts of us that just need the correct training. And so I love everything you're talking about. It's so incredible to me. And it just shows all of the work that you've done to be able to get to where you are. And it's cool to see.
Yeah.
So tell us about where this all took you, because we've been talking about this kind of one significant moment in the past, right? That was obviously a major catalyst into your future. Many years have gone by since then, and you are now doing all kinds of cool work and projects. And I'd love to talk on some of those, inclusive of the mobile sauna that we got to partake in a while back.
Yeah. So fast forward a few years. Now here I am. I started Neuromastery. I'm going to back up a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I think there's some pieces there that might help bridge the gap.
In between, yeah,
well,
please.
Because nothing was ever learned all at once.
Yeah.
Just like everybody else, I had to grow my neuroplasticity through a lot of discomfort and a lot of failure, and that was just a part of my journey. And, so after that, I graduated high school, went on a 2-year mission, and it just seemed like when I was out there, I kept getting confronted with a lot of companions who suffered with mental health and had a lot of struggles with trauma and things like that. And then, and that kind of piqued my interest. It's like, oh, I understand this in a way because I've kind of gone through it. So I started to learn. That piqued my interest. Then I come home and, go to college. And I went to Utah State 4 days home from my mission. And I didn't really have any friends up there or anyone that I knew. And I remember for the first few weeks, I just sat at home all by myself. And it was like, this is so weird. And it's another challenge that I got to figure out. And I remember in college, just, again, I sat there feeling bad for myself and thinking like, if I can just figure this piece out, if I could just figure out how to be healthy. And it took me about, I started to do summer sales, and I would go out and knock doors. Mm-hmm. And I remember in the door knocking world, everyone just tells you, work harder, do more stuff, just basically do more. And I would do that. I was like, okay, I'll work harder. I'll outwork everybody. I would get 300 doors in a day. And yet I wasn't selling as much as everybody else. And I did this for 4 years. And I sat there, and when I would come off, I was like, okay, I need to figure out who I am. So every summer I would go out and I would try different jobs and different things so I could figure myself out, because I wanted to learn who I was. And at this time, I was pretty stubborn. I was in a finance degree for the first 3 years of my college during this time. Okay. So not working with people. I was like, that's not me. I don't know. I want to learn how to make money, and I that's what I'll do. And I'm just gonna go work with my dad because my dad's been a successful entrepreneur. I'll just go hitch a job with him when I'm all done, and that'll be it. Um, but so during those times, I would try all these different jobs, and none of them seemed to fit. I was like, I did Domino's Pizza. I was like, nope, that's not it. I'm not a franchise guy. I tried out for the Utah State wrestling team. I figured I would go try that. I'd never wrestled before, but I went and tried out and got on the team and got demolished for a semester. And
That's awesome.
but I was like, I need to figure this out. And then all of a sudden, I got married. And when I got married, I realized I got this girl. She lived 20 minutes away from me. Right? So you wouldn't expect things to be that different. It's like, oh, everyone sees the world kind of the way I do, right? Because you grow up and you just think like, yeah, we're all pretty similar. And then all of a sudden you get married, you get hit in the face. You're like, oh, like they think different. And, I started to see different aspects of her, and I really wanted to understand behavior. And I stayed in finance though. And I was pretty stubborn about it. But as me and her, like the first little bit of our marriage was really rocky. It was hard. We fought a lot, and we weren't always that kind to each other, and there was a lot of things that we had to figure out. And that hit me in the face like a truck because, for me it was like, okay, if I can just get on a mission, a lot of hard companions. If I could just get to college, no friends. If I could just get married, rocky.
Not feeling connected.
Not
deeply.
feeling 100%, all of it. And it was like, so what the heck? What am I doing? Right? Like, what's the point of all of this?
Yeah.
I don't know what the heck's going on. I'm sitting here, I'm doing all the things.
Right.
That was my biggest thing. I would knock doors and I'm doing all the things. I'm making money. I'm meeting people. I'm doing the work and I'm doing everything. Why doesn't things work out for me? And I had to face that question. And that was a hard one for me because it wanted to be, well, she's just angry. Right? Well, they're just rude. Well, they're not having that much fun anyways, right? It was always outward looking. And until I turned inward, I didn't realize. And my wife, during this time, being the beautiful soul that she is, she came to me and she sat me down and she said, Brock, why are you doing finance? Why are you trying all this stuff? You're losing yourself. And she said, you need to be working with people. And so it wasn't even me. And I said, no, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm 3 years deep in this. Right? I got one more year. And she said, no, you need to be working with people. And in that moment, I completely pivoted and went and got my degree in psychology, graduated, and started working with people. And that's where Neuromastery was born. And a lot of that came from me wanting to look inward and figure out, like, if I can do it here, then I can do it out there. And that's where it all started. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a common thing to feel like it's all the external is to blame. The external is all to blame, and eventually things start to point back to you, right? All the arrows start to point back inward, and it sounds like you had that in a pretty profound way, and then made a pretty significant pivot in your path. And for you to go through all of this, I mean, I feel like it's pretty early in your career, in your college and then career, to like make changes like that. I feel like for a lot of us it happens, oh, I already got my degree, I've already been working in my career, and now I'm at midlife and I'm going, yeah, who am I and what is this all about and whatever. And so I guess I'll just commend you for having some awareness and getting into this early on. So studying psychology, and then straight out of college, did you start your own thing? Was this the Neuromastery? And you still need to tell us like what that is, like what is Neuromastery?
Yeah, so Neuromastery is I help men build mind and body resilience, so that way they can take on challenges easily and effortlessly. The way that I do that is through the 4 pillars of a healthy person: physical, emotional, spiritual, and your mental. Okay, so basically on a practical level, what that looks like is I build workout programs, I help with nutrition, because I can't work with your emotions if you don't have a body that's functioning correctly, right? Learn that in high school. Emotions. I help find alignments. I work with belief systems and identities, and I help create peace is honestly what I do. Because peace to me is when what you do, what you think, and what you say are all the same. I don't care what people do or how they do it. All I care about is that the alignment is there behind it. They know why they did what they did and how to do it so they can repeat it. And that's where you can take on challenges easily and effortlessly. Spiritual pillar, we do an app with breath work. We help with meditation. I teach the science behind what I'm doing. And then we have a community. And this is the most important aspect, where people can get together, because having a community helps show you what is possible.
Mhm.
You know, you want to heal a hurt dog, put him in a healthy pack. And that makes all the difference. And so that's what neuromastery is in a nutshell.
Cool.
And we can dive more into the basics of that, but that's what that looks like.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to kind of dig into some of those pillars that you brought up, and go a little deeper. A few things stood out as you listed those off, but let's just go sequentially, and like we can maybe ask some questions. So I love that you start with just the foundations of health, right? It was nutrition, exercise, like physical, which so often people talk about mental health, mental wellness, and there might be struggles around this or issues, or there's depression, and all these symptoms start to show up, and the focus is how do we fix that? But before, what precedes all of that is, well, are you getting adequate sleep? Or how's nutrition? How's exercise? How's movement? Because for some reason we have separated the idea of physical health and wellness and mental health and wellness. And we think they live in two totally disconnected worlds, but they're completely overlapping, right? Completely related and connected. And I'm just preaching to the choir here, saying this stuff to you, and you probably know a lot more about this than I do from your education and experience. But if there's anything more you want to say about that first pillar, please share.
Well, just going off your thought, maybe not even the first pillar.
Okay.
This just goes off neuromastery in general, but honestly, that's why neuromastery, that's why I started it in the first place, was I went down the personal development path. I tried everything, right? When I was in college, I was trying stuff. Believe me, I had no lack of energy. But
I believe you.
But here was the problem is I'm trying to build the antithesis of the personal development industry right now. Because right now, what I've noticed in the industry is, just like you're saying, they've broken everything up like a broken mirror. Everyone's taken one piece and they say, this is the one piece that's going to solve all your problems. And it's wrong. You need all of them. And what works for one may not work for all, right? A lot of times what we're seeing in today's world is, so let's say you go to therapy. I think therapy is a beautiful thing and it's needed in this world. But the thing is you get a lot of therapists who are there for 3-4 years and without any improvement. There's no end goal. Or you'll get on some sort of medication without an end date that's actually working towards something, which is growth. And self-improvement and self-healing are two different things, right? You're healing in therapy, but rumination comes into play after a while, where the problem, actually continuing to talk about the problem, becomes the problem.
Grows.
Exactly. And then you have on the other end, you got these millionaires who are making tons of money, right? And because they've made a ton of money, they want to tell you about your marriage, and they want to tell you about health and fitness and wellness and all these things. And everyone's taking this piece and says, this is going to solve your problems. And it leads people astray, right? And then you got these fitness guys who are on, PEDs, steroids, and testosterone. And then they're thinking, then they're training people, thinking that that's what they're going to get if you follow their training program. No, you're not. You're going to get that if you get on steroids. You know what I'm saying? The industry is very broken up. So when I started Neuromastery, I wanted to create a holistic wellness program where you have everything all-encompassing, where you have workout programs that are there available to you to be able to grow. And what I do, just talking about the one pillar, because we'll dive into the rest, but I do a hybrid build. The reason I do the hybrid build is because, according to the British Medical Journal, it's the one that decreases your all-cause mortality by 60%. Okay, and when I'm referring to all-cause mortality, I'm not saying you're going to live longer. That's not my goal. I don't care if you live longer. I want you to live better. And so all-cause mortality decreases your chance of death at any given point in time by 60%. That's huge. Because if your chance of death is way lower, then your chance of living better is a whole lot higher. And if I can do that, that's what I want to provide, is the best opportunity to live the best life you possibly can. And that's not always foolproof, but it's the best opportunity that we have according to the data. And I think that's where it gets important. And so that's kind of why I structured Neuromastery the way I did.
So real quick on that, that exercise program that you said has that significant benefit, can you unpack that really quick? Like, or is that just is there too much in there?
Oh, yeah, that's easy one.
Okay.
So the hybrid build is basically like a run lift combo.
Okay.
And so for those of you that are looking to get into exercise and you do want to increase your all-cause mortality, what you would do is you'll run 3 to 4 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And you'd lift about 4 times a week for about 45 minutes, and then you'd do 20 minutes of running, 45 minutes of lifting. And it can be any type of cardio. So it could be, running, biking. It's just that
Swimming,
you're
whatever.
in a zone 2 is what they call it, where your
Mhm.
heart rate is 145 and below,
Hmm.
okay? And then your lifting is strength training, because once you hit above the age of 30, your muscle is going to decrease about 2% per year. So you want to really make sure, because your muscles are directly attached to your immune system. And so if you want to be able to stay healthy and strong and be able to have a body that functions, you need muscles that function, because they are part of your day-to-day. And it also helps build your bone density so you don't have osteoporosis and weak bones that are fragile. It helps lube up your muscles and your joints so they don't hurt. So there's so many factors that go in. So that's kind of where you're at the pinnacle of fitness from what I've been able to find.
That's awesome. Okay. Thank you. Second pillar. I already forgot what it was.
Emotional.
Emotional. Yeah. Tell us about the work that happens there. You talked about identity and some good stuff.
And I'm interested on top of that, how you differentiate that with emotional and mental, how they are separate. Because a lot of times I feel like those are interchanged.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the way that I've changed them, this is just my definition. Okay. So emotional is dealing with emotion, right? Happy, sad, things like that. Mental is taking on challenges easily and effortlessly, where you're working your brain, you're going through the discomfort, you're putting yourself in new situations, where you're actually regrowing plasticity. That's just how I've differentiated them. I know there's a lot of different definitions, but in my world, that's what I'm.
Well, now you say that, it sounds obvious, so I'll run with that. I like it. I say people have interchanged it. I have been interchanging it. So that's a good differentiators. Those are good differentiators. That's good. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, that's great. So on the emotional side, what I'm doing is I'm working with belief systems, patterns, identities, things like that. Because like I said, a lot of times, you have these patterns and belief systems, and your brain is obsessively, it craves familiarity. And so what happens is a lot of your familiarity was created in the ages of 0 to 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's when your brain is operating in what's called a theta state. If you're familiar with meditation, you do breath work, so you know all about it. But the theta state is where you're in your emotional brain. It's when your brain is the most moldable. And your ages 0 to 7, that's all that exists. Your prefrontal cortex hasn't developed enough yet. And so that's where your brain is completely being molded. And so a lot of your belief systems come from there.
I was going to say, it's usually by the age of 7 is where most of your beliefs are formed, right?
Yep. And that's
Which
where
freaks me out for my children. Right?
Well, it's okay, because no matter what, as a parent, this is just something that I've had to come to terms with having a kid. Is like, you're going to traumatize your kids one way or the other. And, and you just have to understand that you got to do the best you can. But the thing is the problem with that is ages 0 to 7, we don't remember a whole lot of them. And so our subconscious has now been created from this place that we don't know what's there. We don't know how it got there and how it's affecting us. And so that can be a massive problem, because if we don't know what's there, how it got there, how it's affecting us, we don't know what patterns it's creating. And so what's happened is we have this equilibrium, right? Let's say that it's, your standard is being normal and kind in the beginning when you're a young child. If that gets knocked out of whack, what happens is in the beginning, your brain obsessively tries to get it back. Okay, we want to be in kindness. We want to be in love. We want to be in abundance. Okay, but as it gets knocked out of whack enough times, let's say it gets knocked out of whack to anxiety, where you feel like you have to be afraid. Let's say it gets knocked out of whack to where, you start to learn what depression is and how it feels to not feel included and hopeless and like there's no point. If you go there enough times, that becomes your new normal, because remember, your brain doesn't care about what's best. So then it starts to automate that behavior as your new normal, because it craves familiarity. So whatever's the most familiar is whatever's getting wired in. And then as you get older, whenever things are good for you, let's say things do start to go the way you want them to, your brain's going to take you right back to anxiety, because it says, this isn't where we belong. We belong in fear. We belong in anger and anxiety. And that can be a scary thing. And if you don't know what's there or how it got there, you don't know how it's affecting you, and you don't know what your normal is. Like I said, when I first got married, her normal was way different than mine. And she only grew up 20 minutes away from me, right? And that's just because we grew up in different households. And all of a sudden, we had to understand that part. So when I start working with a client on the emotions, what I'm doing is I start to understand their patterns. Like when they're telling me stories, I don't really listen to the events that happened because those are honestly irrelevant to me.
Right.
I'm listening to the descriptors because that shows me what's got wired in. And then as I do that, then I start to create a plan where we're going to knock that out of whack again. We're going to start to knock their normal out of whack to where we can create where peace is their normal, where abundance is a part of their system, to where what's best is also what's automated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, it's fascinating stuff. It's and so much of that, as you said, is connected to this, upbringing, childhood, or early years. Does it in your practice? Does it matter to go back to those early memories, or to try to recall what they are and kind of move through that? Maybe find, if we developed a belief that is limiting or false because of, some repeated childhood experience or one specific traumatic memory or whatever it is. I know a lot of therapy is around like, let's go to that memory and let's like, let it go and change our meaning and our understanding of it now as a person who has greater wisdom and compassion than the child did, right? Who had limited capacity to understand what was going on. So those are some techniques and some things that I've become more familiar with, and I found to be interesting and helpful. But I'm wondering if is that how you approach it, or is it a different way? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, I love that, and yes, it is necessary. When you have triggers, or when you have even small traumas, big traumas, it doesn't matter. You the only way to work with them is to go through them.
Yeah.
So you got to go back some way or another, whether that be through meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Or some sort of experience that will help you go back. So yes, I do work that way.
Okay.
But I do see it a little bit more unorthodox. Now this may be wacky, okay? But
we love it.
I'm just
go there. We want to hear the wacky.
Yeah.
but a lot of times people see the world in a 3-dimensional, point A to point B. I'm trying to get you from here to here, and in the emotions, it doesn't exist. There's no, you're never going to get rid of that trauma. You're never going to get rid of the trigger. You're just not. And when you set that expectation for somebody, it always is going to be unmet.
It's always going to be what? Sorry.
Unmet. Which is going to create a lot of unhappiness, because the biggest source of unhappiness is unmet expectations. If they think they're not going to feel anxious anymore, they're going to be let down every time, because anxiety is a beautiful part of who you are. You have to see it in a 4-dimensional world where the only point that matters is the present. And when you break that down into who you are, I do this activity with people where you can hear these 2 different voices in your head. But the thing is, when you're listening to the voices in your head, you're not either of them. You're just the person who gets to make a choice which one you're going to listen to. So when you look at life from a 4-dimensional, there's not a point A to point B, it's circular, where you can make a choice on what you want to do with your past and what you want to do with your future. And you can start to design the future the way you want it to be. And you can get into very big detail about that and actually start to build it and create it to where that becomes your reality. That's actually who you are. Your brain doesn't know the difference between reality or imagination. They're almost identical. So this event that's happening right now with us talking, I could do inside of my head and wire in that same thing to where that becomes who I am. And you can also do that with your past. So when you're going back to those events to go through them, you're reliving them. And you try to make that as real as possible. And because as you do that, it's the same. You're not getting rid of them. You're just learning to be able, the way that I view it is as if you're at a swimming pool. And right now, most people are probably not even by the pool. Let's say the pool's a trauma. You're way off by the fence, holding on to it, trying not to get anywhere near or touch it.
Which is most of us.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Right. And so what you got to do is you then got to go to the pool. And you got to dip your big toe in, go back to the fence. Go to your ankles, back to the fence. Knees, all the way until you teach yourself to learn how to swim. So that way, the water doesn't affect you. You're not getting rid of the water. You're just making it so it doesn't affect you as heavily. And that's the idea of how you heal. And you actually befriend those inner experiences where, the trauma, yes, it hurt you, but it also grew you. It also helped you in one way, shape, or form. And it takes away that stimulation. Like when you look at wisdom, Like wisdom is just being able to look at an event and be not emotionally attached to it.
That's an interesting definition. I haven't heard that before.
I know I'm sitting with that
That's
here for a minute.
yeah, that's awesome. You also spoke about identity, which is obviously really connected to these traumas and beliefs, right? Because it points back to who am I or what I am, right? Maybe any additional comments on identity as a part of this?
Yeah, identity is an interesting one because a lot of times when you look at society, we want to deem some is good, some is bad, some is right, some is wrong. Identity is usually attached to a lot of labels.
Yeah.
First thing I'm going to do in a session is break all those down. You can't have them because what we do is we overly attach to certain identities, and then when we're not that, it's like, what? So do I not exist? Who am I? Right? I attached myself to a football player. Look where that got me. Right? 10 concussions deep and a lot of hurt. I couldn't disassociate with it, and so that hurt me. And so a lot of times when I look at identity, it's just living out of a place of want. And I know that sounds weird because a lot of times it's easier for us to say, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I should be doing this. I have to do this. But those are all fearful words. Those come from a place of fear.
Those are all shame words.
Yeah.
Exactly. Want is a place of abundance and healthy. It's like I can want this life, and that is just enough. And I don't want this life because I believe it'll make me any better than the person I already am. Like I am whole and I love myself just the way I am, but I can want it just for the pursuit of learning to grow and become the best version of myself, and that is it. And that is enough. I don't need any more than that. Because the whole point when you're working with yourself is like when you're healed, when you're fully self-healed, it's not a certain state, it's a sense of love. And it's saying, look, I love and accept you just the way you are. You don't need to change a thing. And then when that underrides your self-improvement, taking on challenges just becomes a part of the inevitable because you're going to want to continue to figure yourself out.
Yeah, from that place of feeling wholeness, of feeling love, it does motivate to go and create and to engage and interact with the world and with others. And yeah, as opposed to from that place of brokenness and emptiness where I need something to help and fix me and, help me feel better about myself or whatever. It's a completely different approach to life. And so I love that you spoke to that. And I think it's really interesting the way that you kind of connect the ideas of identity with, I'm just going to use the word desire, like, it'd be maybe another way to say like, what is it that you want? And then detach all other labels and meanings. We've talked about this before, and I'm sure you've actually brought it up a moment ago of this idea of the true sense of self, like this very deep sense of self residing in just consciousness, like pure consciousness, pure existence, pure spirit even, right? And then there's the thoughts and the emotions and all the things that we experience through our senses and the physical world and all of that. And you mentioned this idea of like being able to sit in the place of the observer of whether it's oppositional ideas or just maybe there's chaos, maybe whatever it is that's happening before us. Like if we can get in the seat of the observer of that pure place of consciousness, like that's where the true sense of identity resides, which is just it feels like a very abstract concept though, right? It's hard to like wrap our heads around that's who I am, right? Because it's almost void of all the things that we think identity should be. But getting to that state and then being able to connect in that space with that true part of ourselves where we're not caught up in the storms. And that's one of the objectives often of mindfulness or meditation is getting into that place of stillness where you can be the observer of thoughts, the observer of emotions, but not caught up in the whirlwind of all those things. And then choose from that place, right? Like, and that's what you said earlier of like, in the exercise you do of here are the two opposites, and you just get to choose which path, and desire's there and want is there, which is an interesting part of that core sense of identity that I'm now kind of thinking through, like what are the attributes of pure consciousness? Well, is desire one of them? I don't know. It's just a cool concept to dig into.
Yeah, I love that. I think, and it's, it just allows you to immerse yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's no expectation. There's nowhere you need to be or have to do. It's just, who do I want to become? Like, what's possible for me? How far can I push this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love physical challenges. And in those physical challenges, it's like, how far could I actually push this thing? You know, just like, because it's not like that physical thing's going to make me any better, but it's just, I want to see what I'm made of. And then that pure consciousness, it just allows you. And when when pain arrives on a 100-mile race, it's like, hello, pain, my old friend. Like, I know you. Welcome to the party. You know, it's not something negative where it's like, go away.
Right. Yeah.
I want to stop hurting. It's like, no, bring it on.
I love that.
Okay, we got a few minutes left. We have two more pillars, 3 and 4. Could you address those real quick, a little more deeply?
Yeah. So I'm going to go over the spiritual one a little bit more briefly, okay? But it's just a connection to something greater than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that it's not just us out there. Because when you think it's just you, that's a very hopeless feeling. And to think that you're all alone is one of the biggest lies your brain tells you. When we're struggling, your brain often wants to tell you that you're not alone. It's not worth it. Nobody cares.
Or that you are alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the only one that's experienced this before.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're all lies.
Yeah.
And so that's where you just have to understand that there's something deeper than you out there that can help. And that's where I work there. But in the mental pillar, this is where life gets fun. Because it's taking on challenges. And it's having a community of people. Like, this is why we're doing the Connect and Conquer Festival.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm on a mission to create an environment where everybody can feel like they're a part of something bigger, because what you're trying to elicit is what's called oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, oxytocin is the main neurochemical when it comes to pro-social behavior, which is trust, love, and wanting to share things like that, being a part of a group, right? But another thing that it does is it also increases your pain tolerance. When you understand that you have something greater than yourself that is there backing you up if things go wrong. If I fail, I know I still have them. When you're outside of there and you have to take on challenges, or you have a stressful situation, which you're never getting rid of the triggers. So stop setting that expectation. You're never going to get it easier. It's just like when you get an ice bath. You're never going to make the cold water hot. So stop trying. Embrace the cold. But in the cold, you can find peace. You can calm down. You can learn to swim in that pool. And you can do that a whole lot easier if you have people in a group behind you, backing you up, to know that if everything were to go to crap right now, I have people who care. And that makes all the difference in everything else of life. And so if I can build that in that pillar, where we're all taking on challenges together, you understand that there is a community. It's amazing how far that can go.
Love that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Such
a beautiful visual too, with the cold water, and something that obviously we're passionate about. So as our last question, we have to wrap things up, but we've talked a lot about becoming, and I'm interested in who Brock Painter is becoming. What's both as who you are, and also what's next, what's coming up, including tell us about Connect and Conquer.
Yeah, so Connect and Conquer is a festival that we're putting on to connect and conquer. We're going to be doing some cool stuff. We have, we've wanted to incorporate all 4 of these pillars. So if you guys heard anything today and you want to actually experience it in real time, this festival is a great time, because we will go through every single one of those in a day. Just give you a taste. But in the morning, we're putting together 50,000 meals for a service activity. We'll have a sauna village. Mike's going to guide us in some breath work. We're going to have some great speakers there that are going to be able to, yes, they're going to be speaking, but they're also going to be doing a Q&A, so that way we can get real-time help for what's going on in our lives. And then in the night, we're going to have a country concert where we'll have a mechanical bowl, and it's going to be fun. So that will be a great environment to have. But who am I becoming? I'm just becoming the person I'm proud of. And I don't all the way know what that looks like. I know what Neuromastery looks like, and I know what I'm trying to grow on that side, where I'm, wanting to help as many people as I possibly can, and hopefully change a generation in that. And I'm trying to teach proper health principles. And if I can reach 10,000 people, we can change a generation. And that's the goal, is to reach 10,000 people as quickly as we can, to help learn those proper health principles where, it's not that broken mirror. People actually realize how many tools are actually out there and how many people actually care. Not just someone trying to make money off you, or not just someone that, read a book one time and wants to preach about it. You can live these things, and you can actually have them. And that peace that I'm talking about is available to you. It's not available just to one. If it's available to one, it's available to all. You just have to do what it takes to figure that out. And it does take a little bit of work. but it is beautiful on the other side. And like I said, there's no rival, but you can at least find that peace to where whether things are good or bad or anywhere in between, you'll be okay, so you can weather the storm. Like if you understand that you're strong, it doesn't matter what comes your way, whether it's good, bad, right, wrong, anything in between, you can handle it. And when you can handle it, life becomes a whole lot more blissful because it doesn't matter what happens. You can just continue to weather the storm.
Beautiful.
Love it.
I feel like
Thanks.
that's a very good place to end. I feel very inspired. Thank you, Brock, for coming on with us today. And will you just let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Brock Painter Official or Neuromastery. So check me out there. I'm on LinkedIn a little bit, but mostly Instagram.
Yeah. Cool.
Well,
Right on.
thank you. Thanks for being with us
Yeah,
today.
thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you.
Great
Yeah, I
conversation.
appreciate you guys. Thanks for the invite.
Right on.